I joined the military before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. I had been raised extremely anti-homosexual and homophobic. The military seemed like a good place to fit in. Before I go any further, I need to say something really quickly. This month is Pride Month, and this week actually in Seattle is Pride Festival, and on Saturday they'll be having the Pride Parade. If you're in the area and you haven't gone, you should go and check it out. I will guarantee you, you will have an interesting time. But as I was saying, when I joined the military, I was already a homophobic bigot, as I had been raised being taught that homosexuality was an evil sin, and that it was actually a choice. Never mind marriage. Gays were referred to as sodomites in my family, and were to be looked down upon and pitied, and those that suffered from homosexuality were often compared to drug addicts or possibly serial murderers. Seriously, in the eyes of God, homosexuality and killing multiple people were equal sins. Worse, actually, if you consider the tradition that sodomy was one of the 4 sins that cried out to God for justice. That was posted on my kitchen wall growing up. I remember when I was about 14 and hearing that a family friend of ours was having some difficulties at college. Later on, I heard my parents talking about how he was being constantly tempted with homosexuality. It was the first time I had heard that word, and it sounded bad. And later on, when I found out that some of our neighbors were gay, I asked my mom what that meant. My mom said that they were disgusting lesbians that were living in sin. It was a common theme in my family growing up. The gays and the lesbians were taking over like they had an army or some shit. I stand corrected. And so from an early age, I was indoctrinated into hating homosexuality. Not the people, as we were told, but the act. Hate the sin, not the sinner. But looking down on him, that was okay. So was telling them that they were going to spend eternity in hell having their sexual organs burned off. Yeah, I heard that a few times. I look back with shame now of the many times that I argued with people that homosexuality was actually wrong. I even went as far as to declare that I had chosen to be straight when they had pointed out that you couldn't choose to be gay or straight. Looking back now, I can clearly see that I didn't choose to be straight any more than I chose to have blue eyes. It's not my fault. I'm still slightly unnerved and intimidated by the sight of a penis. Even my own sometimes. It's terrifying. By the time that I joined the Navy, I was completely unaware of exactly how bigoted I was. This was only strengthened in boot camp, when we were forced to shower with 20 men at a time. If you dropped the soap, you were a faggot. If you made eye contact, you were a faggot. And if you didn't compare your dick sizes to everyone else's, you were definitely a faggot. We were called queers and girls by our drill instructors. And if we complained about it, we were then called faggots and asked if we were declaring our faggotry, in which case our discharge papers would be happily filled out for us to sign. The message was clear. Gay is not okay. What a shock then when I went to my first duty station at Everett, Washington, and found out that there was a lesbian on the military police force. We were actually partnered up and became good friends before I found out that she was gay. I was surprised. She had a ring, she said she was married, and she wasn't this miserable person living in her sin. And she thought I was gay. This would be a recurring theme. We became very good friends, and we talked about all different sorts of things. I asked her about her life, I asked her about her wife, and how she knew she was gay. I was completely fascinated by this, as this was not someone that I expected to find. This was not how my family had described gays to me. This was different. She was also there for me when I needed her. She was one of the people that talked to me immediately after I found out on that Christmas Eve that my ex had had an abortion. I became very close to this person. She was the reason I concluded that lesbians probably weren't that bad. Gay guys, I was still pretty bigoted against them. And that continued until I arrived in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in 2009. Let me tell you something really quickly. Guantanamo Bay sucks. It's 128 degrees and 99% humidity. That place sucks ass. Just want to get that off my chest. Thankfully, I got one of the rooms that had a brand new air conditioner installed. I also had 2 roommates. For sake of anonymity, let's call them Bob and Lou. Lou was our quartermaster and secretary, for lack of a better word. And he made Freddie Mercury look straight. He was in charge of room assignments, and he placed Bob, himself, and myself all in one room. I hadn't really ever talked to the guy before, other than in passing, but as we became roommates and I got to know him, we actually became pretty good friends. What amazed me the most was how openly gay he was and how no one really seemed to mind. I thought he was a pretty cool guy. He used to pick me up a Cherry Coke anytime he went to the PX on base. Never really thought anything of it, even when his friends started coming over and hanging out at my room, even when he wasn't there, and talking to me. Oh yeah, and the room? Literally a giant metal box. Think the Connex boxes, like those big cargo ships that they have the boxes on? Yeah, one of those with an air conditioner stuck in the wall. Oh yeah, and you had to pay for your own cable and internet that ran to the room. It sucked. One evening, after we had been drinking heavily at the beach, Lou confessed his feelings towards me. I was flattered, but said I wasn't gay. He insisted that I had to be. After all, I knit, I sew, I can iron a shirt that will give you cuts on your fingers from the creases, and I can bake a mean loaf of bread. I told him I had a girlfriend back home and a kid on the way, as far as I knew. He tried to kiss me several times, and each time I pushed him off and told him he was too drunk and didn't understand what he was doing. I told him to go home, go sleep his desires off. Eventually he did, but only first after going into my sleeping area, where I was in bed asleep, and proceeded to rape me. The worst part is being so scared, so terrified, so confused, and just laying there and taking it and hoping and praying that the person will just stop and leave you alone, and being too scared to actually do anything. The following week, he was constantly around telling me how I must have really actually enjoyed it, how I had led him on, and how it was really okay. I hadn't. I didn't. And it wasn't. Then it got worse. Found out later on, my entire division, including all the way up to my commanding officer, thought that we were dating and just having a lover's quarrel. On July 4th, my chain of command informed me that there had been an investigation and no wrongdoing had been found on his part. However, I was to be removed from those barracks and moved to the far side of the compound because he was so upset by the entire ordeal that he had attempted suicide unsuccessfully. I was ostracized. Then, in September, I finally went to NCIS. Sure enough, they found that there hadn't been no investigation, and as far as they could tell, my chain of command and commanding officer had covered everything up. I initiated an investigation, but the damage was already done. My trust in friends, in the chain of command, and the entire justice system was crumbling, was mostly broken. What few pieces were left were crumbling. And after I separated from the Navy, and the case finally went to trial, he was acquitted on all charges due to a lack of evidence sufficient to convict. My trust was completely broken. I'm now diagnosed PTSD, and I was diagnosed shortly after I was separated from the military. My girlfriend had broken up with me while I was still in Cuba, and all my family could think to do was to tell me how broken I was and how I needed to pray to God to help me through these difficult times. It was too late for that. Now, why am I sharing this video with you on Pride Week? 2 reasons. 1, it's been 5 years to the week that I was raped. And 2, someone like me, who was raised hateful, bigoted, anti-homosexual, homophobic, can today, after being raped by a man, look you in the eye and say, not only am I not homophobic, am I not bigoted, am I not anti-homosexual, but I actually actively and openly support the gay community. And I'm proud of that. If I, who went through all that, can rise above the indoctrination and circumstances where many others would have just continued in their hate, if I can rise above, then anyone can. And no one has any excuse. Not in my eyes. How did I do it? Well, I read books on psychology. I wanted to understand what kind of person could do this to another person. And so I devoured books on psychology. And what I found in them was actually a little surprising. Rapists, whether they're gay or straight, male or female, share some things in common. They don't rape because they're gay or because they're straight, but because they want that feeling of power, of control, that self-serving satisfaction, among many other things. It wasn't about him being gay. It was about me continuing to say no, and him not taking that for an answer. I also began researching homosexuals and the gay lifestyle. I even went to some gay bars and talked to some of the patrons. Then I found out that all the people who go to gay bars are straight, so that was kind of a waste. However, 3 years after the incident, I had been through intensive therapy and was okay. I even attended my first Pride Festival. And again, it was okay. These people were not my enemies. No one wanted to molest me. They were victims too. I talked with one gay guy who had been raped by a straight man who had insisted that the gay guy should have liked it. It's funny, now, that the people that I was raised to hate and condemn, the people that I was the most scared of, and that the most vilified in my family, these were actually the people that were the most accepting and the most loving and the kindest people. These weren't moral evil monsters. These were people just like me, just like everyone else. The people I once railed against, I now proudly fight for. And so, if you're watching, Jory and Tyler, thank you for showing me who you actually are instead of who I used to think you were. and to the many others who prove to me that the actions of a single evil individual do not constitute the minds or the desires of an entire community. Thank you. I love all of you. And one more thing. If there are any homophobes that are still watching this video, I really have only one thing to say to you. Go fuck yourself with a cactus.